Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining the session today. I can see we're having lots of people logging in from all over the world. So that's absolutely brilliant to have you all here today. Welcome so much to this special Disability Innovation Live webinar. So today we are going to be looking at disability lens investment with a particular focus on mapping of the sector. And this is part of the Opportunity of a Billion webinar series, which is focused around some of our work with the Assistive Technology Impact Fund and looking at the importance of AT and the distribution and the scale of that through low and middle income countries. So just a little bit of housekeeping to get started. There is captioning available for this session. To turn that on, you can just put the closed caption button, which is normally at the bottom of the screen. The chat functionality, you can communicate with the panelists via the chat, but we ask for all questions to come through the Q&A box if possible, please. And that means we can come to them as we come towards the end of the session. And these slides are all recorded, so we'll be able to share the webinar with you afterwards, and there'll also be a transcript available. So just to give you a little bit more detail about Disability Innovation Live, it is the Global Disabilities Innovations Hub's monthly webinar series. And the focus of this is really just to share knowledge and experience in disability innovation and look at the stories behind the products and the people that are involved in this fantastic sector. And it's also a bit of an informal space for kind of ideas and reflections, and also your ideas and your feedback that all contributes into kind of how we continue our work moving forward, but also really helps to kind of get different experiences and perspectives on the sector as a whole as well. So the GDI Hub is a research and practice centre, and we focus on disability innovation, working in 35 countries across the world, and we've reached 21 million people since we began in 2016. So quite a lot, and hopefully that number continuing to increase significantly as we move forward as well. So just a little bit of an overview of the session today. We've got a really interesting panel to discuss in a little bit more detail around the mapping of assistive technology and also kind of investment within the sector and what's that looking like. So we're going to start off just by setting the scene somewhat and then look in a little bit more detail about the mapping, and then we're going to move into a panel discussion just to get in a bit more depth on some of these areas, followed by some closing remarks at the end and also some Q&As that will come in from yourselves. So I'm now going to hand across to Kathy Holloway. Kathy, I'll leave you to introduce yourself a little bit more and just give us a bit of an overview really of the space.
Thanks, Louise. I hope you can all hear and see me okay. I'm Kathy Holloway. I'm the Academic Director of the Global Disability Innovation Hub and a Professor here at UCL in Interaction Design and Innovation. And I have got the great honour and privilege to set the scene for you all today. So we're going to be looking at assistive technology, the investment and the opportunities. So what does AT investment mean? Why it's needed for different types of businesses? So anybody who's joined this seminar or this live event will know that there are over 1 billion people who need assistive technology. We know that on average, when assistive technology is provided well, it's over 3 products per person that are needed. So that's 3 billion pieces of kit that are needed around the world to help people who have an impairment, live with a disability, to be fully included in society. And that's a really obvious moral objective. What's often forgotten about is the investment opportunity. The investment opportunity in this area is massive. Through GDI Hub, we have been through the AT 2030 programme, which is kindly funded by UKAID, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Commonwealth and Development Office, I should say. We have looked at not just what the return on investment is in terms of the cost benefit analysis. That work has been done by At Scale, the Global Partnership on AT, and that's demonstrated a $9 return for every dollar that's been invested. So that's great. We've gone on and we've continued to look at the work of the downstream of this. So what happens when you actually, and the upstream investment opportunities. So what happens when, for example, you build ophthalmology services within a country? What happens when you build provision to give hearing aids, provision to give wheelchairs, provision to give prosthetics? Well, first of all, you create jobs in terms of personnel, but you also create jobs in terms of the manufacturing opportunities of those products. As well as the obviously cost benefit return to the individual and to their families. So we have shown that there's about an additional $11 return from these up and downstream, as well as the $9 to $1 return that you get from a basic cost benefit analysis. So you might really stop and wonder why we haven't all cracked this, why we haven't all jumped into this investment space before. And that's because it's not easy to crack. Although we all know that when it works well, it scales well and it provides return and benefit, the fact that the products sit as very different types of products, and the fact that those products are competing against other needs, means that sometimes it's difficult for governments, it's difficult for investors to know where to put their investment. So this is how the Assistive Technology Impact Fund is beginning to help to develop the evidence that's needed for a new narrative. So we want people to understand that there is a growing market and that growing market can be tapped into. So the opportunity that we see is this growing market. And what we hope to be able to show you through the conversation today is that through the landscaping work that we've done, that you can see where the individual opportunities are, where the individual entrepreneurs and startups that are beginning to scale exist, also where the need exists and where we're able to invest there. Secondly, we'll be able to demonstrate the power of, and we did this in the previous seminar as well, so the webinar, if you didn't catch it, you can get it on catch up, as they say. And on catch up, you will see that we have this idea within the Assistive Technology Impact Fund of taking a venture and giving them what we call the Scale Studio experience, which is both venture building. So we understand how to build that venture in terms of a business model, perhaps in terms of a new financing model, make sure they get introduced to the right partners so they can actually test and develop this in country, but also give an expert advice in terms of the technical provision. So sometimes in order to scale, the way we manufacture a product also needs to change, for example. And so through the AT Impact Fund, we are demonstrating that this model of like last mile investment to get a venture to scale is working. So yeah, I finished by saying that the wider environment, why now is the time for innovations to scale. I really genuinely believe a number of things have come together for assistive technology and disability inclusion more generally to be able to scale. Firstly, is that people have been exposed to and understand inclusive investment. So we've seen that, for example, through the gender investment lens. People have seen that when half the population is left behind or left out of the economy, that is bad for everybody. And it's easier then, I think, for people to extend that logic to the 15% of people who live with a disability. So first of all, people understand that it can be done and that it should be done and that there is growth for everybody when we do it. Secondly, I believe that the sector as a whole, assistive technology, is maturing. We are beginning to get evidence of different types of business models that will scale in different types of areas that will mean that it's not simply monopolies and simply sort of mass production that's shipped. We are seeing very different models that are emerging and that are maturing. And thirdly, technology has advanced. Mobile in particular has unlocked huge potential, as has the internet. And so those three clusters have come together to make it a very ripe time for us to demonstrate the value of disability inclusive investment, whether it be through assistive technology or whether it be through the wider services and inclusive society investment. So I really do invite you to listen to the rest of this. Louise, come back in and just say that we know the demand's well documented, and I hope that by the end of this hour, you will also be kind of convinced with us on the journey that filling that demand and the ways in which we do that also now has the evidence for you to get involved in the journey. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Really interesting there just to hear about, I guess, that those kind of core deliverables in terms of that building the evidence and looking at the narrative around this and all those opportunities that the current environment is enabling, and I guess where there's that room for growth within this space. So it leads us really well onto our next section, which is going to be looking at the lens mapping itself. So I'm going to hand across to Joshua and Tamara, and I'll leave yourselves to introduce yourselves to the audience and tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing alongside the Assistive Technology Impact Fund.
Thank you so much, Louise, and thank you, Kathy, for a brilliant introduction. I'm going to top and tail this, and then Joshua's going to give the kind of meat on the bones. But I'm Tamara Giltsoff. I am one of the directors of the Assistive Tech Impact Fund, and I've been working with GDI Hub for nearly 2 years now. So I'll just, say a few words. Well, first of all, thank you, audiences and panelists, for participating today. We are particularly excited to have IFC to support this endeavour here today. That we at GDI Hub are currently working with on a separate and adjacent piece of work exploring investment in disability innovation. The purpose of mapping the AT ecosystem is really to highlight and make visible, sort of turn inside out, the innovation happening on the ground in emerging markets. And we want to turn this inside out and highlight it to policymakers, to funders, and to investors. We know the size of the market and the market need. What is lesser known is the evidence of the innovation on the ground and the business models to reach populations in emerging markets. We decided to collaborate with our good friends at Brighter Bridges, who are leaders in mapping emerging market tech ecosystems in Africa, because we know that once they map this sector is literally on the map. Just to note that we have mapped these companies at an HQ level, so the map could be much more full if we actually mapped where these companies were operationalizing their assistive tech. Our goal now is to catalyse the sort of support any early stage tech sector in emerging market receives. This sector needs grant capital to catalyse more innovation and to support business model innovation, like we are doing on the Assistive Tech Impact Fund. And it needs a blend of impact capital and commercial capital to help some of these innovations to scale. It is crying out for the sort of support that the solar home system got in its early days. That is donor capital and philanthropy, venture philanthropy and impact investment. I'm going to stop there and hand over to Joshua.
Sure, thanks, Tamara. So as you've heard, my name is Joshua and I lead ecosystem engagement at Brighter Bridges. Brighter Bridges is loosely a data-driven research firm that is trying to build the knowledge infrastructure on business in underserved markets. So I'll start by sharing a bit more about how mapping can be used to identify opportunities and trends in the AT sector, then why sector mapping is really critical to provide the foundations for investment, and how AT really fares when compared to other sectors in the continent and in emerging markets generally. So the AT sector mapping really has helped us to discover both existing and new players within the different disability domains. It has also helped us to find business models that work and are worth replicating across emerging markets. So what that means is that we're able to identify technologies that are sort of gaining traction, and also spot commercial opportunities that are worth pursuing in these different domains. Mapping AT ventures over time will definitely allow us to find trends across these geographies and technologies models, and see how really the ecosystem is growing or not over time. The AT ecosystem is considered to be rather nascent, unless less considered as an area to invest, really, because of the lack of information and data about ventures that operate in the AT space, right? So, but things can change. I think with the access to knowledge and information, that provides a good starting point in the investment process, as investors will only invest in what they know, right? So AT mapping really contributes to set the foundations for investment, because it does help investors to know the key players within the AT space and further understand the industry dynamics. The availability of data and information within the AT space is critical to help these investors really source and size opportunities. It also works to really send positive signals that essentially indicate that there are innovations within the space that are investable. It also works to showcase the growth that the AT space has sort of seen over the period, And it also works to create a narrative and again, build a case that commercial solutions in this space is worth investing, right? It is also easier to follow progress and also capture the growth that these highlighted companies in these maps have seen, and somewhat increase the resultant investor confidence and appetite to sort of invest in assistive technology ventures. And finally, how does assistive technology really compare to other sectors? Assistive technology is rather underfunded, right, when compared to other sectors, even when compared to health and well-being, which are sort of closely seen to be related to. To give some perspective, the continent has seen about more than 5 billion in funding, disclosed funding, and that is Africa only. And most of this has been deployed into solutions that provide some sort of financial access and financial technology, and a really small percentage is going to IT-related ventures. And I can just probably mention a couple, and that will be it. So investment in the space is barely there on one hand, and it's sort of dominated by hardware and manufacturing companies that are based overseas and have some degree of distribution in these emerging markets. And less of the commercial funding really is going into IT ventures. And what we see is that most of the funding that goes into IT ventures comes from philanthropy and humanitarian funds. From the support side, the same is true, because we see far less venture support programs being set up to help IT ventures exist and scale, right? And this is true for other sectors such as fintech, such as healthcare. We see much more specificity and also focus by be it accelerators and incubators to support ventures that operate in those sort of spaces. So I'll take it back to Tamara to also tell us what sort of comes next post these problems.
Thank you, Joshua. As you can hear, this sector is crying out for more participation and more investigation. So the next steps, really, we encourage you to explore the map. We encourage you to participate. We're going to make the map open so that people can contribute innovations that we may have missed, and to keep an ongoing and live dialogue around the map. We see it growing. And we encourage you to get involved in funding disability innovation and tech. This today is a real call out to donors who play a really significant role in this, development finance at large, philanthropy, impact investors, and venture capital, to get involved in the different parts of this emerging and exciting sector. I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really interesting just to hear all about the different work that's gone in and the importance of kind of mapping this area and how that compares then to other sectors. I guess what's happening on the ground and why now? Why is it so important? Just to give everyone who's listening just a bit of an overview, currently on the screen is the map itself that's just been referred to. So it's a world map coloured to showcase the 80 existing in different countries, and then that's I guess organised per kind of type or space within the AT market. So as was kind of highlighted through that, it's a brilliant starting point. It shows us, I guess, the breadth of some of this work that's happening on a global scale, but also it's just the beginning of this space and the development that we could see within the sector. And that's really what we want to go on to next in terms of having a bit more of a discussion with some of the fantastic panelists we've got on the call today, just to hear a little bit about different people's experiences and why and how we can see AT moving forward and where investment can come into that and the role that it can play. So the first question we're going to look at is the size of the market. So it's huge, 1 billion people, and it's only set to grow with aging populations. So we're likely to see that number increase very significantly. So we know the scales there, and a lot of research has gone on around that. So I think my first question has been touched on a little little bit by the panelists already, is why this space is so underdeveloped and underfunded, and really just looking into kind of how we answer that question. So to start with, we just wanted to come to Max, who's joining from GMSMA. Max, I'll leave you to introduce yourself, and it'd be really interesting just to hear about your experiences within the space and why you think it is that currently kind of the funding is so kind of under the level it needs to be for the opportunity of the market.
Great, thank you very much for the opportunity. So my name is Max Cuvelier. I work for GSMA Mobile for Development, and one of our activities is to support the assistive tech space with support from FCDO UK8. I think this is a great question, and I think there's actually a step before looking at the size of the market, which is the fact that there's first a mobile disability gap to be overcome. And that's particularly important for assistive tech innovation. As we improve digital inclusion of persons with disabilities and smartphone ownership in particular, we grow the addressable market. And where we grow the addressable market, we make it more sustainable and we make it more attractive for assistive tech innovation to develop. And maybe if I have a minute when I'm talking about a disability gap in mobile phone ownership, this is something that we're seeing across the board. Our FCDO funded research in Kenya, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Ghana has seen it everywhere. And actually what's concerning is that this gap widens as you move along the customer journey. So there's a gap in terms of basic mobile access, but that gap is even bigger when you talk about mobile internet usage or smartphone ownership. Just to give you an idea on smartphone ownership, in Kenya, about 42% of the population owns a smartphone. This percentage goes down to 12% when it comes to a person with disabilities. In Algeria, 63% of the population owns a smartphone, only 15% of persons with disabilities. And the larger smartphone ownership gaps are particularly concerning as smartphones have embedded accessibility features which enable more effective use of devices by persons with disabilities, and they can also cluster together multiple assistive technologies which improve an individual's functioning and independence. The main barriers are pretty well known. The top ones are affordability, primarily affordability of devices, and a lack of knowledge and skills. But the positive side is that there is evidence that suggests that if we're able to remove these barriers, and if we get access to smartphones for persons with disabilities, they can consume advanced mobile internet services on par with the rest of the population, and in some cases can even be power users of these services.
Thank you, Max. Really interesting just to understand some of those gaps that you mentioned and the difference between access for people with disabilities compared to the kind of average across the population as well. And I think it's a really important element to highlight there. So it'd be really interesting, Louisa, just to come to you really with the same question, just understanding a bit about kind of why have we got this kind of significant underfunding, and what are kind of those main barriers?
Yeah, thank you. It is a great question, and really I just need to sort of emphasize what Max just talked about. He said, we know affordability is one of those barriers, but we have found with ATIF that a surprising number of the population, especially if they're given financing solutions and creative ones, can actually afford a lot of this technology that we're talking about. So for many years in the AT sector, we felt like affordability was the main barrier. And I think what I'm so excited by is this idea that we're actually breaking down that misconception a little bit through ATIF, and I think we're going to talk about that later. So certainly that was one of the barriers, is affordability. And then I really like to touch on what Max said about the lack of knowledge and skills. And definitely this is what we're finding in ATIF. You know, a lot of the venture building that we're giving does focus around marketing. And to a much higher degree than in other tech sectors. And the reason for that is people with disabilities aren't searching this stuff out like perhaps consumers in parallel innovation sectors would. And so one of the things that we need to do, and have been doing very successfully in the sector, is breaking down stigma of disability, showing the value of assistive technology in the workplace, in the education space, and really highlighting to and with persons with disabilities just how much stuff is out there. You know, Kathy talked about, you know, the average person needs 3 assistive technologies, and if I look at me as a person with some mild disabilities, I do have 3 assistive technologies right now. I've got my glasses, which I use because of difficulties with seeing, obviously, and then I have these really great Apple iPods, which I use because I have trouble you know, prioritizing what I hear, and it helps me with that. So I'm just Joe Blow off the street, and I have a need for all of this assistive technology. So again, we really need to break down these barriers of the lack of knowledge that people have as to what's available to them. And I'll hand back to you, Louise, and I hope I answered your question there.
Wonderful, thanks so much. Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it's kind of taking that step back sometimes just to reflect on how much assistive technology is involved in everybody's lives, particularly nowadays, and kind of the way we all work and socialize and engage. So I'm going to move on to the second question of the panel discussion now, and we just want to look at kind of how governments and organizations are currently investing in AT, but also with a particular focus on low and middle income countries, and what more can be done. So I'd really like to come to Mansoor. If you just want to introduce yourself and maybe just give us a little bit of an overview really of that.
Sure, happy to do so. And I feel like my job has been done by Kathy, Tamara, and others, given, you know, a lot of the matters that they discussed are things that the UK FCDO is funding. But by way of introduction, I'm Mansoor. I am the Deputy Group Head of Africa Economic Development at the UK's FCDO, and I've been quite closely involved with the AT Impact Fund as a member of the Investment Committee. And so it's been really exciting to see what kind of innovations are coming through, and see from a funder's perspective what role our funding is playing in developing that ecosystem. One of the big issues which are, from my perspective, that exists, and this partly is also responding to the first question, is the numbers such as 1 billion people being the addressable market, whilst great and impactful, for me, that doesn't really cut the mustard in terms of disability and ATs, because of how heterogeneous the market is and the customers within that market. So as we all know, there's a wide range of categories within disability, and even within certain disabilities, there's a huge range. So segmentation of that and having the right data to inform the financing opportunities, the business models, is really vital. And for me, that's one of the most important and value-adding roles that government funding, such as through the FCDO, can have. And this is what the GDI Hub has been doing through not only the mapping work that we've seen, but also just other avenues to build that data infrastructure that's vital to then understand what are the customer needs, the user needs, and develop ventures accordingly. So for me, that's been one of the most vital roles that our funding can play, and I encourage others to play a similar role in building that data infrastructure and segmenting the needs within that broader 1 billion market that we all know potentially exists. And it's only then can we drive forward a better kind of AT availability, accessibility, and affordability for the constituents of that market. But let me hand back to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, really interesting just to delve into some of those details a bit more. And as you say, kind of highlighted already by kind of what everyone's kind of brought to the panel so far today. I think what will be really interesting to look at now is really what's happening on the ground. So in terms of kind of how ecosystems are currently set up and how collaboration is being used to create that enabling environment for AT. So it'd be great to come to you, Bernard, just to hear a little bit more about some of the projects you're involved with. So Bernard, if you'd like to introduce yourself and maybe just share a bit about some of your experiences around what's happening on the ground in this space at the moment.
Thank you very much. So my name is Bernard Shira. I am the Kenya country representative for the Global Disability Innovation Hub, and I am also the director for Innovate Now, which is Africa's first assistive technology accelerator that is run collaboratively between GDI Hub and AMREF Health Africa. So I think my experience over the last 3 years, where we have spent time to test out and to build essentially this fast inclusive innovation ecosystem in Africa, that there is truly a huge potential for solving the access gap through innovation and supporting startups. And over the years, we've been able to support more than 20 African AT ventures pretty early in their development stage, where we intervene at the validation phase and provide essentially tools and resources to help them move up the other stages of development. And I think one of the interesting things we've learned is that we really need to build an inclusive process for supporting AT innovation, and that means working with persons with disabilities and involving them in the innovation process. And we do this through our Live Lab network, which essentially creates proximity for AT innovators to test out and run clinical trials on their AT products. And this has been also successfully implemented with the local DPO. And I think some of the learnings after 4 cycles of supporting AT ventures is that, one, we have been able to demystify that building an AT business, at least from a business perspective or sustainability perspective, is no different from building a venture in other sectors. And so AT entrepreneurs should and must focus on building sustainable business models. We've also learned that it is critical that this early stage support for AT entrepreneurs include the full circle of not just education, but also an injection of capital at that very early stage. So currently, what we are learning and experiencing is that, just like in other sectors in Africa, early stage capital is really difficult to get. So AT startups really do struggle quite a bit in their pre-seed and as they approach the seed stage. And I think it's an opportunity here to kind of build the AT ecosystem or support ecosystem in a sustainable way. So we do need more investment to support ventures going through acceleration or actually in their early stages with access to capital, so that they can actually be able to achieve those business milestones. So we've also learned that there's a huge opportunity to actually provide access to hands-on support for early stage AT ventures. So as we know, the ecosystem is just now emerging, and there are a lot of challenges for entrepreneurs in this space to do with standards, to do with navigating the business environment, to understanding, how to run clinical trials, and all this are areas where it would add a lot of value to provide more direct support. And we're also learning the power of collaboration, and that is real opportunity to really scale up assistive technology accelerators and support programs. And then to build a pipeline of AT in Africa, we really need to drive more investment in pipeline generating activities. I think if you look at the most vibrant sectors in the startup ecosystem, they have been built over time, and they include, boot camps, they include competitions that, allow students and talented problem solvers to start understanding the challenges of AT. And this essentially feed into accelerators and incubation programs. And, Africa is a huge continent, and that means we need to increase the momentum of providing access to venture support across the continent. So we do need more investment and more partnerships to create a vibrant AT ecosystem. And some of the achievements we've had in this area, for example, is that Innovate Now was a founding partner or member of Plus N, which is essentially a startup community bringing together AT and inclusive tech programs across 4 continents. That's Africa, Asia, North America, and even Asia. So we are at the initial phase of building this ecosystem, and I think we must sow the seeds of reaping more in terms of value creation in this sector. And so we must not be shy to actually invest and collaborate more. So if you'd like to learn more about what's happening generally in this sector, I have published an article that you can find on Medium. I will put the link on the chat, and that should give you a good idea of what's happening on the ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bernard. Really interesting there just to hear about the importance of that support. And I'd say that's through the kind of the entire journey for kind of entrepreneurs, particularly from that kind of early stages you mentioned right through to kind of creating that pipeline and the ecosystems, and how all those different elements need to come together and work together to create the environment that we need for AT to be developed and then scaled and then kind of taken to mass market. So it'd be really interesting, Max, to hear just from yourself a little bit around if those are that's a similar experience that you're finding on some of the GSMA projects that are being delivered at the moment.
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, I mean, Bernard has touched on a lot of those topics, and I totally agree on assistive tech that's developed for persons with disabilities, but also by them and with them. That's extremely important. And access to early stage seed capital, which we're trying at a very low level to support as well. I think maybe if I can add, or actually not add, zoom in on the partnership side. We do strongly believe in partnership. In particular, we believe in partnership between the smaller and the larger private sector. And in a lot of areas, it's proven transformational through our work, and we see the same potential in the AT space. And in particular here, what we're looking at is partnerships between like the innovators in that space and mobile operators. And we see them ranging from like very low touch partnership collaboration, like promotion, for instance, or just making the service available to users, to customers, all the way to really like higher, deeper collaboration on like localizing, testing, launching co-branding, for instance. There's the whole spectrum. We actually have a good example through our innovation fund for assistive tech that's funded by FCDO. We're working with a startup in Pakistan called DevTalk. They're doing real-time on-demand access to sign language interpretation services. And it's a great example of the type of partnerships that they can have with mobile operators. With Telenor Pakistan, they're helping them to enhance workplace inclusion for the upcoming cohorts of their program called Open Mind Trainees, which has the objective to bring more persons with disabilities into their workforce. And basically, they're also using DevTalk service to provide sign language assistance at various company events, for instance, and forums. With Jazz Pakistan and Jazz Cash in particular, so the mobile money platform of Jazz, the partnership there enables the DevTalk customers to pay for their sign language subscription of services using Jazz Cash wallet. So basically making payments a lot easier. And they're also working together on a voice over IP feature to enable group calling features, for instance, or also allowing non-smartphone users to join in. And there's also even potential for replication. There's another market, and the team has asked me not to communicate what market, because it's still being developed, but they're partnering with mobile operator in another market to localize the DevTalk app. And it's really great to see replication on the way, because in the AT space and in other spaces, it remains a very difficult topic. So in our work, we really try to stimulate those partnerships between mobile operators and AT providers through our innovation fund grantees, but also beyond. We also regularly share new AT innovations with the mobile operator community, but it still feels like if we're not doing this, there are not many people who are doing that. So I think every effort to make sure that whatever new innovation is coming in, whatever new company is looking for funding, whatever breakthrough is happening, it is communicated widely through the ecosystem, and not just within the AT community, but beyond, to just raise awareness and potential for partnership, funding, mentorship, and so on.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for those insights, Max. Fascinating to hear about the projects and the learnings from those already. So I'd now just like to look at kind of the next question, really just understanding a little bit around from the investment perspective and looking at the mapping that was introduced at the start of this session, to just really ask about what's the overall trajectory, what is the next step for the AT space, and how is things like the mapping going to really help support that. So Tamara, we'll maybe come to you first, just to hear a little bit around kind of where you see those kind of learnings taking us, and what are those next steps?
Hello, hi, that was a surprise. Wasn't expecting to be brought back in, but very nice to be back. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to build on the map. We will expand the map, as I said earlier. This is the beginning, really, of our sort of, well, this series of events is the beginning of our real outreach into the investment and funding ecosystems. We've spent the last 18 months to nearly 2 years working on the Assistive Tech Impact Fund. We now have 5 portfolio companies within ATIF. Many of you joined the call 10 days ago, I think it was, where we highlighted some of the stories coming out of our portfolio, and we will be sharing pitches with each of those organizations in January. And the reason why I say that is because these organizations in our portfolio really illustrate the potential. And the potential is complex. They're not all the same. They're not all hockey stick style fintech companies that are going to grow at the same pace. Some of them will grow and scale. Some of them have commercial models. Some of them are shifting from non-profit models to social enterprise models. And some of them are replicating an already successful model into new parts of the African continent. So what next really is to dig deeper into the investment and funding ecosystems. We have been spending the last 9 months really engaging, talking to funders, talking to investors, talking to philanthropy, working with the likes of IFC and starting to engage with and talk to other development finance institutes to understand really where two things, where disability inclusion sits within existing portfolios of investment, and where investment into disability innovation could sit within those organisations and what types of capital and support it needs. So I would encourage you all to delve into the map, as I said, but really to start to see what is coming through the Assistive Tech Impact Fund as an illustration of the potential opportunities for investing in this space. I will keep calling it out. We need more organisations beyond FCDO. Yes, FCDO have definitely supported us in this endeavour, but it's not enough to have a single donor supporting innovation in this space. If you look at how much support the other tech sectors have had. So we invite and really invite, and the opportunity is there to really pioneer and lead in this space as a funder or as an investor. So we really invite you to come on this journey.
Thank you so much, Tamara. That was really good just to hear, I guess, that the pipeline moving forward. And I think that leads me quite well onto kind of the next area we wanted to look at in a little bit more detail, was about what do investors need to take the leap, and kind of what are the sticking points that need to be overcome for that. So it'd be fantastic to hear from you, Mansoor, just to hear a little bit more around what your perspective is on that, in terms of what is it that we as a sector need to be doing to really highlight and showcase where these opportunities lay, and how people can come on board and work with us to kind of be bigger than the sum of all the parts that we're working on individually, really.
No, I think hopefully today's session has exemplified why investors and of different types should be involved. And I feel like this data infrastructure that we're now putting together, including this interactive mapping of the opportunities, will certainly help to not only credentialize what these opportunities are, but also start to build that kind of momentum and awareness of what opportunities exist for different types of investors. I think what we still need to do is also look at what types of capital are needed at this stage. And as Tamara mentioned, we are still in this very nascent stage of developing this sector, especially within emerging markets, and therefore a different type of capital with more patient time horizon and risk tolerance is what's probably needed. And I'm really encouraged to have IFC on this panel, and interested to hear from them later. I think the way that investors should start looking at this sector is in a portfolio mode. And that's where essentially I feel there are two tracks within that portfolio. One are those technologies which I would characterize as mature and for the mass market, for example, eyewear and spectacles. And they probably have a different type of capital requirement. At the same time, there are those technologies that are either nascent or focused on a very niche market. So again, that will require a different level of capital, but also a different level of intensity. And as Bernard was mentioning, there's a lot of venture building support, hand-holding that is needed when incubating those businesses. So again, I guess if I bang the drum around segmentation, if investors also start to take a portfolio approach, they can also then construct a portfolio which better manages risks from those ventures that are more mature and for the mass market, as well as those that may be more geared toward a niche market and nascent ventures. And I think the other key role that investors and as well as facilitators, such as FCDO, can play is stimulating partnerships. And so I'm really excited by what Max had to say about the partnership they have in Pakistan for one reason. And that reason is, when we think about progress, technology is not the end, but ATs are a means to essentially enabling people with disabilities to better partake in society and economic opportunities. And so what Max described in terms of using that AT to better include people with disabilities in the workplace, that's a real fantastic way to demonstrate what success also looks like. And hopefully that grabs the attention of investors as well.
Excellent, thank you so much for that. And I think you're right, it's that element of what success looks like, and that's something that is only really just that we're at the start of that journey, and it'd be fascinating to see kind of over the years to come where this takes us. And I think really interesting there, you kind of pointed out as well that would be fantastic just to hear a bit from IFC as well. So I'm actually going to hand over now to Self-Cook, just to hear a little bit more around kind of their perspective on the AT market and really what you see the future being.
Thank you. My name is Selçuk. So I am from IFC, but just to clear and clarify, I'm not on the investment side. I am working with our investment colleagues, and I am leading the advisory services specifically for the venture capital, disruptive technologies investment. So we are working very closely with our investment colleagues in order to try to find very innovative business models and the innovative technologies that we can invest in. So my reflection will be a little bit more on what is our investment colleagues looking at, because after me being an engineer myself, we are trying to, we have a certain view on technologies and disruption and business models, while when we look at it from our investment colleagues, they have a slightly different view on how they look onto the investment. Before I go into that, maybe I should also just very briefly, is like, as Mahmoud was saying, Mansour was saying, it's like the assistive technologies is a nascent market. It is, it is developing, and I think that all over the globe, we are just starting looking at it. And I really commend the GDI and the UK government for picking and supporting this, because I think there's a lot of work to do. As it is one of the sectors, I think there are certain sectors across the globe that is addressing, there's a challenge, there's a sector, there's something problem wrong in the society that has just become accepted as normal, and nobody has really addressed it, and they are quite difficult. And those are the things that we are looking at. So very commending the organizations for supporting it. But from IFC side, we have just started looking at it. From the World Bank Group side also, is that we are trying to understand, but we have got a strategy in place. We have looked at the market. We are looking into and setting up and doing more in this place, but we are still learning. Our broader goal, our overall goal, is to try to influence our investments and our decision in investment and our activities to address the private sector and advise the private sector to enable them to both employ and design workplaces, products, and services for people with all abilities, and create an economy that works for everyone. And this always also includes that we will be, starting looking into how do we support in shaping the legal frameworks for assistive technologies, the labor markets, access to finance, entrepreneurship, and distribution of goods and services for all. So having said that, as I said, we have just started looking at the market, and we are very happy for all the work that is going on. We have not still yet found a good opportunity as IFC for our investment, but it's also one of the reasons to that IFC is maybe lagging behind in investment, is that we are a large investor in investing in high tickets. So in smaller companies, startups, and etc., we are kind of waiting and looking into a high investment. So from having said that, I think that a couple of things that I can reflect on is, one, when we are looking, and when our investment colleagues are looking at new businesses and innovation, is I think that there is, the first thing that of course we are looking at is scalability. And the scalability is, of course, one of the things, again, for the assistive technologies, it is, and disability in general, it is a very challenging sector. Although the market and the need is big, the potential is big, it is also very fragmented. And when I looked at the map, we really good work, Tamara and team, in terms of getting the map up. And so it's like, but there is like, I was counting 18 plus different categories for the market, right? So it is so when you look at it from an innovation perspective and investing in an innovator or a startup entrepreneur, you always look into which part of that market are they addressing, and what is the addressable market in specifically that segment. So I think that that is one of the challenges that we are facing, is when investors are looking into it, into a potential investment, they see this fragmentation and they see that the addressable market, even though the total market is very big, what they will be investing is not that big. So it's the scalability is becoming an issue. And with this, my advice to entrepreneurs, as I'm always saying, is that, like, look beyond the disability. When you're working on a technology, is like there are opportunities beyond this, the initial idea that you started with. And also when I look into the categories, all of the, like almost 80% of the different categories in that innovation is not only related to disability, it is related to the normal life of everyone. Visibility, hearing, and etc. It is problems that are existing all over. And as Louise is saying, that people who are maybe not, like looking at them and having and don't regard themselves having a disability, they have needs that needs to be covered. And the entrepreneurs in this specific space, I think they have a great opportunity in shaping the technology, because they are addressing some of the core challenges for every human being. And so look for scaling your solution, please look beyond for looking at opportunities that is involving everyone's life. The second thing that is maybe also a thing for innovators specifically, I would also say, please, my advice is don't be, believe in the forecast and the market opportunities too much. They are very good guidance for you, but it also that sometimes the opportunities and the market size and etc. it takes very long time to realize. So that's also one thing. So the other thing that for what we're also looking at when we are looking at the innovation and entrepreneurship is on what is the value chain and how does the value chain work. And there are two terms of value chain I think that is very important to cover. One is, what is your value chain? How are you going to produce, distribute, sell, service, and etc. But I think one maybe important thing is also in looking into how do I tap into other value chains? How do I embed my product in value chains that already work, so I don't have to look into try to like create something new from scratch. And that's one thing that I think that some of the products and some of the companies we see that are very successful, they have actually managed to kind of piggyback and get embedded into existing value chains for distribution of their product. The third thing that I think that we have to think about is for assistive technology, any technology at all in general, is that we have to look beyond the mitigating or minimizing and solving a specific problem. And the solar, for example, home was mentioned, and we as IFC, we ran the Lighting Africa very successfully for a very long time. And we got solar into a lot of homes. But one key challenge that has only started to being addressed is, what does this enable the people to do? So please look at what is the value that we are creating for our users? What is the added value? Do they get better jobs? Will they be able to earn more money, and etc.? And I think that's a critical aspect that our investment colleagues are looking at when they look at it, is that when they do an investment or when a person buys a certain service, how do they, create an additional income that will allow them to continue their journey? So with this, I would also maybe just like lastly for innovators in general, be bold, be patient. I have myself been an entrepreneur startup 2-3 times in my life. And specifically on the technology side, things take time. Don't be discouraged. There's a lot of things that with all failures, you will maybe experience failures and challenges during your journey, but it is definitely going to be a course. Be patient and be bold and visionary in terms of what you want to achieve.
Thank you so much for those reflections, and really fascinating just to hear around kind of the the place in which kind of it would be looking at investment and the importance of that scalability, but actually how those learnings can be carried right across from kind of early stage entrepreneurs right through to much larger businesses as they develop within this space, and actually how important those kind of key learnings around I guess the scaling of products can be as well. So really fantastic just to hear from all the panel members today and have so many different perspectives and insights into AT as an investment proposition, really, and where we're at, and I think it's become quite clear from today that actually it's the start of something really quite exciting, and there is so much opportunity within this space, and actually it's a space that is just opening up, and we're just at that initial stages of, and I know that's a lot of work that's happening by many people on this call, particularly the GDI Hub and our programs around AT 2030 and the Assistive Technology Impact Fund, supported by UK Aid. So it would be fantastic now just to come to Kathy. I know Kathy's had a few internet problems, so I just want to double check if Kathy's on the line, just to hear any kind of final reflections and thoughts, I guess, in terms of what success looks like now. Just give a second to see if Kathy's on the line. If Kathy's not able to join us Louisa, we'll just come to you and just hear the same, really, just in terms of any final reflections and what you think the next steps are. We'll come to you.
I would be delighted to talk about that. I really can't emphasize enough the importance of these strategic partnerships, and the importance of reducing the fragmentation in the industry. We've just heard that fragmentation is a huge barrier to a lot of investors looking at the space. But we're finding that we're improving on this element by really focusing on strategic partnerships between public and private, between small private and large private. And I think that the main reflection I have today is on that, the importance of the strategic partnership. So if you're an investor out there starting to look at this market, one of the big things that you can do is analyze the partnerships that could surround a particular innovation, and then looking at how those partnerships can link with sort of the mainstream to really scale up an innovation. It's very exciting. I can't underestimate, you can't underestimate the importance of those partnerships. And I think the other really important aspect here is, again, if you're an investor or a funder and you're looking at the market, you know, startups and innovators and entrepreneurs that perceive barriers in the ecosystem as opportunities to innovate, they are the ones that can truly make a difference in that sector. So that mindset to overcome barriers through innovation is absolutely critical too. So yes, mindset and strategic partners is sort of my big reflection. And I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So that draws our session to a close today. I know there's been quite a few questions coming in via the chat box and also the question and answer, which I know some of our panelists have already gone back to you all on, so that's fantastic. It's a big topic, so that we are doing a series of the opportunity for billioning, which gives us an opportunity to just look into different elements of that a little bit more. So the next session is in the new year now, and that will be an opportunity to hear the showcases from some of the Assistive Technology Impact Fund ventures, and that will just hear them describe a little bit more about the products they're working on themselves, but also around the scaling up that they've been doing over the last 6 months or so, and they're now at a place where they're really ready for that next stage in that investment. So hearing a little bit more about what the opportunities are there, the numbers, the market, etc., for individual products, and really specific kind of pieces of assistive technology. It's always a difficult one to I guess kind of go into all the nuances and all the details, because it's so varied across each bit of AT and each individual sector and each individual market as well. So we're talking about something that's really quite large. So please do join us for the next session to hear a little bit more about that. We'll also send some more information around after this session, just to give you all a little bit more detail on where you can find the mapping and where you can find some more information on some of the work that's been discussed today. I did just see Kathy flick up then, so I think she might have got internet back yet now. So I'll just quickly hand across to Kathy, just to say any final closing remarks before we finish the session, and just before I do, a huge thank you to all the panelists and the captionists as well for joining today.
Apologies, all I could see the text, but I just couldn't seem to connect. So thank you all for joining. It's been a fantastic discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think that hopefully together we can see that the sector is growing, that the data is coming in, and that various people and funders are helping us to collect the data that is needed to grow the different sectors within the wider ecosystem of assistive technology and disability inclusive investment. We hope to see you all on the journey in the future, and take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That's it for today. We'll see you all next time. Bye.